Yeah. Spit image.
20 years ago, maybe. All right, guys, my name is Brian Lefevre. I'm going to talk kind of fast. Cost seg is a little complicated. I'm not going to dive too deep unless you guys want to. This is really an intro concept. It's really designed to be roughly 30 minutes long. Terry says we got to be on this 20 minutes. I can talk forever on this stuff, so I'll stay on as long as you guys need me. My background, I'm a structural engineer, and I'm the head of operations for a software company here in Denver, Colorado, called Titan Engineering. And we coded a platform called Titan Echo, and we'll talk about our software. Originally, we coded it for CPAs, because as I get you through this, there's an engineering component to cost segregation in the strategy that CPAs can't do. So their only alternative for helping their clients with this strategy would be to hire an outside consultant. So we started coding this years ago to be their back office engineer, so they could actually provide both the two components that they can do, and we do the piece that they can't do. And I'll explain that as I go. So that's kind of our background. You guys can interrupt me anytime. I'm not looking at the chat, so somebody yell at me if somebody has a question. I'm happy to stop and slow down and say it over again. So I'm just going to jump right in. All right, here's an overview of cost segregation. When you buy a building, right? When you buy the building, you're buying both land, which is the dirt, and the improvements to the land. The improvements to the land depreciate over a period of time, meaning the tax law says that those improvements are going to be worth nothing sometime in the future. Again, assuming you don't make any improvements to it. The land doesn't depreciate, right? Because it's always going to be there. So we have to carve out a piece of the purchase price as land. We set that aside. What's left over, we depreciate. If it's residential property, which it sounds like a lot of folks on here today, that's kind of your focus. That land or those improvements will depreciate straight line, which means the same amount every year for exactly 27.5 years. Don't ask me why 27.5. That's the lawmakers making the law. We just have to abide by it. If it's commercial property, whether it's industrial or offices or retail, they depreciate straight line over 39 years, so it takes a little bit longer. So that's ultimately, without cost seg, you are getting a depreciation deduction. A deduction is just, it's a paper loss, right? You're not actually losing the money, but for purposes of calculating your tax liability, depreciation is a good thing, right? So without cost seg, you get a small piece of those depreciation deductions over the straight line over those years, 27.5 or 39 years. But what I want to show you is a strategy called cost segregation. I'll give you a little bit of the history of it. And the goal is to ultimately break this building, which is one asset, break it up into a bunch of pieces, and then evaluate those pieces and see what we can depreciate faster, so we get depreciation deductions today or earlier than we would without it. And I'm going to show you what that means as I get you through this. So that's what you buy. Here's what we're looking at for cost seg. If I break it up into these six main areas, number one is site improvements. We simply say site improvements are everything outside the four walls of the building. This is the stuff on the lot, right? And here's some examples. I won't read this all to you. And Terry said this is recorded, so you guys can get access to this and actually slow me down. I can talk slower, but I don't like to. So there's some examples of site improvements. Now these assets are considered, and once we do this right, they're considered personal property, not real property, which means the law says they're not going to be worth anything in a shorter period of time than that 27.5 or 39 years, right? So the challenge with cost seg is, again, abiding by the law. We have guidance from the IRS on how to do this. So we have to determine what all those pieces are and what they're worth, and here's the key, as a percentage of what you bought the whole project for. And we'll get into that here in a second. So the goal is to identify the items and then figure out what they're worth as a percentage of the purchase price. All right, here's an exciting concept for engineers, probably not for you guys. Historically, and even with cost segregation, the building, the structure itself, is considered real property. So that's the 39-year, 27.5-year stuff. The problem was, historically, if you replaced pieces of the structure, and I always use the roof as an example, if you buy the property and replace the roof, you rip the old one off and put a new one on, the new one is now a new 39-year, 27.5-year asset, right? So now you have that on your depreciation schedule. Let's say you put, whatever, $10,000 on a new roof, you're going to get 1/39th of that as a depreciation deduction for the next 39 years. The problem was there was no way to get the old roof out of your depreciation schedule. And that was problematic because you're going to spend, let me use simpler numbers. Let's say you spent $27,500 on a new roof on your rental property, right? So you're going to get 1/27th and a half of that. So you're going to get $1,000 a year in deduction. You outlaid 27 and a half, or I'm sorry, 27,500, but your tax burden today, it doesn't help you, and you couldn't get the old one out. Everything changed though. 2014, they finalized what are called the tangible property regs, and they introduced a concept called partial asset disposition. It's a phenomenal opportunity. We have to identify the value of the old roof, again, as a percentage of what you paid for the whole project, and we get that this year as a deduction. So you might spend $27,000 out of pocket, you only get a $1,000 deduction on that. Unlike other things like repairs and maintenance, you get it all the same year, but an asset, you only get part of it this year and for future years. Now we can determine what was the value of the roof as a percentage of the purchase price, and we get to dispose of that. So we get I'll use a number, a $10,000 additional deduction this year against our income, further lowering our tax liability. So this is grossly misunderstood. Partial disposition is one of the best things they came out with when it comes to real estate investment strategy, because we were always stuck with depreciating 2 roofs, even though we only have 1 roof. All right, the next is personal property. The goal ultimately is to determine what, of everything that you bought, we break it all up, what's real property and what's personal property. The personal property I'm talking about here is the easy stuff. And we just call it stuff. It's the things that you buy as part of the purchase. I always use the example of a client of ours bought a new manufacturing facility and had an outbuilding, and in it, it had a big lawnmower, a big riding lawnmower. That lawnmower has value as a piece of the property of the purchase price. So in doing cost save, we valued that lawnmower, and if they didn't want it and they ultimately got rid of it, they could get it out of their depreciation schedule and take the deduction. So this stuff is a problem, because without cost seg, it's considered real property when we know it's not. So we have to go through and figure out, okay, what's it worth as a percentage of what you paid for it? And then as you dispose of it, you get the value of that as part of your tax strategy. So we'll talk more about personal property as I get into it. This is the easy stuff. The things that you know are not real property, but unless they're carved out in the purchase contract, it's called a purchase price allocation, you're stuck with calling it real property. And that's what cost seg fixes. Let's talk about fixtures. We simply say fixtures are all the stuff on the floor, walls, and ceiling of the rooms inside the property. Here's some examples. Right? Some of this is considered real property just by the way the law works. Some of it's personal property and is considered to depreciate very fast. A lot of it's going to be 5-year assets. So we're going to get its full depreciation value in the first 5 years of owning the building instead of waiting 27 or 39 years. So cost seg, again, we have to identify what you bought and then figure out what it's worth as it relates to the purchase price. Oh, not too fast. Our mechanical is not that important to those that own the residential stuff, more important to the industrial, commercial folks. Some of your plumbing system in a rental property, a residential rental property, will be able to reclass as personal property. Not all of it. So I don't waste a lot of time here. Just know that it's there, and you want to look at that. We don't want to overlook benefit and value when we're going through segregating our properties. All right, electrical, this is the fun one. Lots of lawsuits, lots of court cases around how to handle electrical when it comes to accelerated depreciation. I simply say it this way. There's 3 types of electrical assets in your purchase. The first one's the distribution. So this is what brings the power to the property, right? The next is the wiring, getting the power from, say, the panel to the fixtures that are using the electricity. And then the fixture is simply your lighting examples and outlets, anything that's using power, right? So the law has evolved over the years to say, we can add up the cost of all this, and based on how the electricity is being used, we can depreciate faster components of the total cost of the EDS, the electrical distribution system. It's a little complicated, but this is why CPAs can't do this. They need an engineer to come in and do this analysis, and that's what we built. So it's a fun part of the law because ultimately there's no way to figure this out without doing a full-blown cost seg, but we get a big chunk of the electrical distribution that theoretically, and it's intuitive to say, well, the electrical system's part of the building, so it should stay with the building, but the law over the years says, well, not all of it. And if we can accelerate the depreciation, I'll show you here in a second how that puts money in your pocket. So depending on how the electricity is being used determines how we reclassify the EDS. Right, so for cost seg, we have to add it all up, we determine how the power is being used, and we carve it all out. So that's a very high level understanding, or hopefully an introduction of the goal here. You have one asset sitting on your fixed asset schedule right now. Cost seg is the strategy of breaking that down into a bunch of pieces and looking at those pieces individually as assets. All right, hopefully this makes sense. Makes sense to me as an engineer. You do not have this misunderstood in the community. You do not have to do cost seg the year that you bought or built the building. You can certainly, but you can also do it later. So I want to show you what that looks like. So I have a $500,000 office building as an example here, and I apologize. I think most of you guys are more on the residential side, but it all works the same. Without cost seg, that $500,000 can be depreciated over 39 years or 27 and a half. With cost seg, we're going to break out pieces and parts, and we're going to reclassify them. In the reclass process, they're going to fall into shorter lives. And the biggest buckets that we see in cost seg are going to be 5-year assets, 7-year assets, and 15-year assets, right? So this $500,000 office building, and again, this is just an example, right? Every property is different and the numbers are all different. If you did it in the year that you bought it, the additional depreciation that you can realize by doing cost seg the first year, the year you bought it, is an additional $24,000. That's $24,000 in additional expenses. And again, not real money, it's paper loss, reduces your taxable income so you pay less tax. The second year in this example is $38,000 in additional depreciation because we're pulling this 5-year, 7-year, 15-year property back for the next few years. We're going to have more deductions than we would have without it. And in year 2, which is really the third year you're claiming, here $22,000 as an example. Now let's say you guys never heard of cost seg before and you bought this property 3 years ago. You've been depreciating it straight line for the last 3 years and you want to do cost seg today. Same assets, same analysis. This year's benefit is $85,000 in depreciation. The concept is called catch-up depreciation. The law says when you do cost seg, what you have to do is determine how much would you have depreciated had you done it the first year. And you depreciated it slowly over those 3 years. So what you missed, you get this year. We catch up to where we would have been had we done it from the beginning. So you can see this number, 85,000, is bigger than the 24,000. Same assets, same analysis, just you delayed in taking the benefit. It's amazing to me, we work with CPAs around the country. The common misconception is if you don't do cost seg the year that you buy it, you've missed your opportunity, and it's not true. And I'll get into that a little bit here in a second. You have a little bit less in depreciation the next few years because you got more in the first year, which is where we want it, right? We want to take as much deduction early as we can. We want to defer our tax liability sooner rather than later. Now, same property, year 10, you can see the numbers jump. 105,000 in this example because we have now depreciated and caught up all the 5-year depreciation, all the 7-year depreciation, and 2/3 of the 15-year depreciation. 10 years into it, if it's a 27.5-year asset, we're only roughly 1/3 into the depreciation of this life, but these assets now are fully depreciated, and we see that benefit in this year's tax return. All right, so we talk about deductions for those of you that aren't real kind of interested in tax. The way the tax I'll talk about that here in a second. We got a pretty cool video on TitanEcho.com that talks about how cost seg runs through the tax return. So let's talk about a concept called effective tax rate. The way we are taxed in the U.S. is a graduated system. So your first, I want to say it's $15,000 in income, you have one rate, and the more you make, the higher the tier you go, the bigger percentage of tax you pay. So when you run your tax return with your CPA at the end of the year, an important number to look at is after all of your strategy, what is your effective tax rate? In other words, how much did you make and how much did you give the government? I'll use a number of, say, 25%, right? 25% is, you know, it's not fabulous, but it's not horrible. So if we can come up with an additional $100,000 in deductions and lower our tax liability an extra 100 grand, that means we're saving $25,000 in taxes. Okay, now we're gonna talk about that, because if we get into the next years, you can see it flips. It goes negative, which means somewhere in the future here, we're gonna have fewer deductions. So our taxable income is gonna be higher because we took them early. Now that's not a bad thing, right? Because you'll pay more taxes later, but you're gonna pay it with deflated dollars, because the dollar is gonna be worth less in the future. So this concept, what you're looking at here, throws a lot of people. And if I'm throwing it at you too fast and you want me to slow down, I'm happy to. But I gotta believe there's people in the audience that don't give a damn about this stuff, right? You just want the numbers, right? So I don't want to go too deep and bore people. All right, here's what you got to come away with, right? Yes, sir.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Absolutely.
So Ching wrote in and said, is rooftop HVAC, can that be considered part of those mechanical systems for cost seg?
Probably not. And I say probably because we're going to get into the body of law a little bit here and how this is done. If the HVAC unit is for general creature comforts in the property, like keeping the place warm or cool for use of the building, it's typically considered 1250 property, or it's going to stay 27.5 or 39 a year. We can get some HVAC units. The example I use a lot is in an office environment. If you have a server room with a lot of server computers and they generate a lot of heat, if you have an air conditioning unit dedicated to that room, that's considered business property because it's directly serving the business. So most HVAC is going to stay 27.5, 39 a year. If we can make an argument that that it's business property, and here's an example. We did a cost seg project on a medical marijuana manufacturing plant in where were they? Connecticut. And their HVAC system, they spent, I want to say, $250,000 on the HVAC system for the grow rooms. And we got to classify all that as personal property. So you got to make the link to the business, and that's really the underlying law. And I'm going to get into the law a little bit here, but hopefully that answers your question. If it's generally residential or an office where you're, creature comforts for the folks that are using the office, we generally have to leave with the building.
Okay, and then one more before you get into the next piece is, when you sell the property, are you having to pay that depreciated tax back? Yes.
It's called depreciation recapture. It's taxed at a different rate than capital gains. Okay. So if you buy a property for $400,000 and you sell it for $500,000, right? Capital gains, you're going to pay the capital gains rate for the $100,000. That's the profit you made, just like if you buy stock low and sell it high. Mm-hmm. If you buy it for $400,000 and you depreciate, whether it's straight line or you accelerate the depreciation, what you're saying for tax purposes is the value of that $400,000 purchase is getting less and less. But if you ultimately then sell it for $500,000, you pay capital gains on the 100 grand between the purchase and the sale, and you have to pay recapture tax because for tax purposes, we are depreciating the benefits. So you have to pay that. You have to pay a tax back on that. So yeah, it's not a gift, and that does lead me into what I tell a lot of investors. This is a long-term play, right? The idea, and that leads me to this slide here. The idea here is if you're a fix and flip guy, cost seg is not worth the time and the money. Okay? It's those of you that are buying and holding, and you're going to use that advantage long term. And this is what it looks like. So I love this graph. We actually built this into our software. Don't get hung up on the numbers. I want you to focus on the trending of the lines. Okay, so the red, we say the red is how much of the IRS's money you can hold on to interest-free. So in my example of a $100,000 additional deduction at a 25% effective tax rate, you're holding on to 25 grand in cash that otherwise you would have given the federal government. right? Ultimately, this red line always goes to zero, because if you keep that property for 27.5 years, you're going to get all the deductions whether you accelerate them or not, right? So eventually you're going to pay it back. You're going to pay the same amount of tax, which is kind of interesting because the Tax Reform Act of 2018, when they lowered the effective tax rates across the board, man, the investors that understood cost seg, everybody was cost segging in 2017 to lower your tax liability in 17, because in 18 your tax rate's going to be lower. So that was a net savings because of the timing difference of the change in the tax rates. But ultimately, if the tax rates don't change, you're going to pay the same amount of tax. That's not why we do cost seg. This isn't a gift. This isn't free money. It's a loan, right? The yellow represents your return on that money you're holding on to interest-free while you have the money. Now, we always use a very conservative internal rate of return of 6%. If you're a decent real estate investor, you should be well above that. But that's what you're seeing here. This trend line is actually parabolic. It's compounding interest. So if you can hold on to their money interest-free, pay it back over the remaining life of the building, you can take that 25 grand or 50 or 100 or whatever it is, that money that you're saving in taxes, you can reinvest. You can put it into repairs on your properties. You can put it into a down payment on another property. The whole concept here is accelerating your wealth using federal dollars that you're borrowing at no interest. That's the game in cost seg. And this is why fix and flip, guys, this doesn't help you, because if you sell it here early, the yellow, you didn't really get to use the money very long. You had to give it back when you sell. That's that recapture tax. So it's a long-term play. Hopefully that makes sense, and certainly, shout out at me on the chat and interrupt me, and I'm happy to slow down if you want me to. I just want to kind of keep everybody's interest and keep moving. Okay, here's how we do cost seg. You have to understand that our background, Titan Engineering, we have a very, very positive, successful working relationship with the IRS. People think that's weird. The IRS has an engineering department. We know most of those guys. We're going to do it right. We understand the law. We respect the law. What we did is we coded complicated legal stuff into a software platform so that you guys don't have to learn the law. You just use the software. So if you follow the audit guidance, it's called the Audit Technique Guide, or ATG. You'll hear me use that term. This is guidance from the IRS to investors that are doing cost seg, saying if you want to use these strategies, this is what you need to do to be defensible on your tax return. So I'm going to sum it all up and not go too deep. To do cost seg, there are 3 pieces of getting the job done. The first piece is called on-site verification. That's their term, or OSV. The law says that we have to verify, we have to prove that those assets exist. We can't just make up numbers. So it's simply what we call the field work, and we teach you, the investor, or the realtor, those are the realtors on here, if you want to provide cost seg services for clients, we teach you how to use our software to go and capture the data from that property. The whole strategy around Titan Echo was, we're sitting in Denver, I could put an engineer on the plane to go do the field work, but that's expensive. What we did instead is we codified a very simple, a bit tedious, but attention to detail, but a simple way for you guys to capture the data that we need to move forward. So to do cost seg, first thing we gotta do is gather what we call supporting docs. These are documents that an IRS guy would ask for anyway, so we ask for them up front. Things like your purchase contract, your closing statement, the tax assessor's doc, the appraisal. If you don't have them, we can live without them, but if you do have them, we want to incorporate them. Right? Then we're going to train you. We're going to connect you with one of my construction analysts. I got a team of engineers here in Denver, and this is all they do. So you have remote support, whatever you need. We also have a knowledge base built into the software, so you can be self-taught if you want. You can teach yourself this at your own pace, at night, on the weekends. So we built an app, a desktop app, to do the heavy lifting. We also built a mobile app. The mobile app was designed to use a tablet like an iPad. Take it to the field. You're going to get pictures and measurements. You don't need any experience in construction. We're going to guide you through what you need to capture. Now keep in mind, what we're trying to do here is to determine what's out there. We want to do it as fast as possible, but we need to be accurate. So the mobile app, you can use a smartphone, an iPhone if you want. I don't like that because the screen's too small. I scroll around too much. I use a little iPad mini and it works real well. So you're going to go to the field. We're going to teach you what you need to get pictures and measurements of. Even if you don't know what you're looking at, you're just going to quantify it, get a picture, and we're going to help you through it. You're going to systematically capture all that data in the app, and then when you get back to the office or the house where you're on Wi-Fi, you push a button, it sucks all that data off the tablet up to the server where we can use it. Then we take that data and we go to the second phase, we call, or what IRS calls construction cost estimating, or CCE. Okay, this is what we do. We're very good at it. I got a great team. They're very efficient, very accurate, very cost effective. So we're going to take your data. We're going to review the supporting docs first, right? So we'll extract whatever we need to out of those documents that are applicable, and then we're going to ultimately do the takeoffs and the quantities based on the data you capture. The idea is that ultimately, if you have cost data, if you built the building and you hired a contractor, we have to use the contractor's cost data. Most of you, you're buying the property, you have no idea what it costs to build, so I got to come up with a construction cost estimate to rebuild it. So we use our database. Think of us like a general contractor that bids to build a new building, right? We have our own cost database, and I have to defend that in front of an auditor, saying, are your numbers good? So this is probably too deep of a dive that you guys want. So all I want you to do, take away from this slide, is this concept called reconstruction cost new. It is foundational to successful cost segregation. So the way I explain that quickly is, you could go out to your property and identify the stuff that you want to reclassify, like the carpet, right? Carpet's going to be a 5-year asset. And you could throw a number at the carpet and say, this is what the carpet's worth. The IRS guy says, well, you got to prove that. And the only way you can prove that is to build up the cost of everything and compare the total cost, which is reconstruction cost new, compare that to what you did pay for it. Because if you got the property at a deal, then we have to prorate all of those values down so they tie out to what you spent. So RCN is the key to defensibility. We're very good at it. That's our job. We have to prorate all of our costs. So we build up a cost estimate as if we were going to go out and build the building, but then we have to prorate it all, and I have to prove all that. That's my job. That's the second piece. At the end of the construction cost estimating work, we now have a building that you spent X number of dollars on. We carved out the land. What's left over is the depreciable stuff, straight line. We're going to break that up into somewhere between 100 to 200 pieces. We'll call it 150 pieces. The third part of the puzzle is called legal analysis. And this is the challenging part. This is the part you guys probably don't care about, but I'll give you some options. Ultimately, we have to look at all those 150 pieces under this body of law. The body of law is a little complicated. It has evolved from the 60s. We tell folks there's about 200 court cases that could apply or could affect our analysis of what we do with those pieces. The goal, of course, is before cost seg, you have one asset. It's considered real property, or what they call Section 1250 property. That's Internal Revenue Code Section 1250. That's the straight line stuff. The goal in cost seg is to break up the pieces, get costs associated to them appropriately, then figure out which ones we can reclassify as personal property. That's called Section 1245 property. So once we make that analysis, then the stuff we can reclassify as personal property, we have to apply what's called the maker's asset class system to it. This is the statute that says, is that a 5-year asset, a 7-year asset, a 15-year asset? And again, not very straightforward, but you know, it's just the way they built it. Once we identify the items, those pieces and parts, and what we can reclassify, we have dollars to that, and what their new depreciation schedules are, then the software just recomputes how much depreciation should you have taken at this time if you had done it in the beginning. And that's your catch-up depreciation. Catch-up depreciation is actually, if you guys care about tax law and statute, Internal Revenue Code Section 41A is where it lives. So it's part of the body of law, the statute in America that says if you miss depreciation, you can catch it up the next year. It's done on a form, a complicated form called 3115. If we have any CPAs on the call by chance, CPAs hate this form. It's just messy. We do it for them. That's how we get this benefit of cost seg into your tax return. So that's the three pieces of the puzzle. Now, legal analysis we generally do for our investor clients. Our CPA partners that do a lot of cost seg, if they have the appetite, we have a training program to teach them how to do their own legal analysis. We offer that to investors, but most of you guys don't care. unless you really want to do it, it's a pretty steep learning curve. We can put you through it if you have the appetite, but it's only going to make sense if you have a lot of property and you want to get more control over the projects. So that's the three pieces of the puzzle and how we run the business. All right, this is my last slide. I did not start my clock. I hope I'm on time. So if you guys are interested in this, I'll give you my contact info here at the end. Really two parts to it. It's pretty simple. We try to keep things simple. You can get access to the Echo platform. It's all cloud-based. TitanEcho.com is where you can go. You can actually get access tonight if you wanted. We do charge for that access. It's 25 bucks. It is month to month. You cancel anytime. I got investors that come in, they do one project and they're out in a month, and then 6 months or a year later they come and do another one. I got other partners that do a lot of cost seg and they just keep their access open. For that 25 bucks, you get two things. Number one, you get what we call the Echo Matrix. The Matrix is our underlying benefit estimating module. We do have a kind of I'll call it a cheesy estimating option on our website. It's not very accurate. It's a lead gen tool. We don't ask for a lot of information, so it's not really specific. If you want to get a solid estimate to make a good decision, getting inside Echo is a better way to go. So what we did is we built a predictor model on top of all of the cost seg data that we have, so we can predict pretty accurately what would a cost seg benefit look like for you based on your facts and circumstances. What type of property is it? How much did you pay for it? How long have you owned it? And all those factors roll into this matrix estimate, and you can get a benefit estimate before you decide whether or not it's worth doing. And it's necessary, right? We want to be able to show you what it's worth so you can decide if it's worth doing. The other part of the 25 bucks is what we call the Learning Academy. We've spent the last, I would say, 3 years pretty heavily in building out a knowledge base. In the beginning, early on in our development of this, we spent a lot of time holding your hand and walking you through it, but that confused people, right? Because it was all verbal and there wasn't any real construct. So we built this knowledge base inside the software, and it's really designed to teach you a do-it-yourself model on how to, number one, first and foremost, how to do the field work, how to run your benefit estimates, how to engage, how to run your field work. All that's built in there, videos and tutorials. So it's come quite a long way. We're always working on it, but you could actually get access to Echo on a Friday and teach yourself how to do the field work and be done on Monday if you wanted to. So we're really spending a lot of time trying to give you those tools and that power to run your estimates and then ultimately execute the field work. So that's step one if you guys want to get into this, because there's really cost seg. I can't really help an investor evaluate the benefit of cost seg without actually getting into the trenches, because your situation is unique. So that's simply the first step. You can get to it from our website if you want. Second step is determining your ROI, your return on investment. Cash is king, right? You guys have all heard that, and you can spend your money on a lot of different things, improvements to your property or better marketing or whatever. Those dollars, you have to figure out the best return on those dollars that you have in your hand. Cost seg is a strategy that may or may not be the best use of those dollars, right? So we want to give you the tools to make that determination. I want to slow down a little bit on this concept called utilization. Depending on your situation as an investor, utilization may be a problem for you. And I did mention earlier about on our homepage, TitanEcho.com, there is a button to watch a video about how the cost seg benefit runs through the tax return. We do a little bit of a deeper dive into utilization. What I would tell you is if you have a CPA, you can run your benefit, your matrix estimate, and give them the numbers, and they will run them through your tax return to tell you, can you use all those deductions, or is there something in your tax return that's holding you up? If it holds you up, you'll use what you're allowed to, and then the rest gets carried forward, right? That's not as valuable, right? If we're talking about an interest-free loan from the government, you want to reduce your tax liability now, right? So if you can't use it all, just because you can segregate your property doesn't necessarily mean it's going to lower your tax bill. Now, I can't see your tax return, and even if I could, a lot of that stuff is a little beyond me. I got a good CPA myself. If you're doing your own taxes and you open up TurboTax and you plug in an additional depreciation deduction on Schedule E, it will run through for you. So either way, we strongly recommend, once you get your benefit and know what it's worth, run it through your tax situation, whether your CPA does it for you, you do it yourself, before you decide to move forward, because you don't want to spend money on a strategy that ultimately isn't saving you money. Right, so that's utilization. I always want to slow down for that because I can't predict whether or not that's going to be a challenge for you. All right, here's Echo's costs. I'm going to go kind of high level. I don't want to really dwell on this, but people are always asking, so what does this look like? What does it take? Number one, you run your matrix estimate. You like the number. You verify utilization. Yeah, this is going to save me money this year. You pull the trigger in the software. You hit a button. You're signing the engagement letter for that project. We charge you $500 for the access to the platform for that project. Then, depending on the size of the project, we have a pricing strata around what we can do for you. So here's the first three. They go higher than this. If the property's under $1 million in basis, that's the first strata. 1 to 2 million, 2 to 5. They go up from there. The biggest project we ever did, and I put this out all the time, $180 million project we did. It was actually the Macy's department store in the Embarcadero in downtown San Francisco. I am looking for a $200 million project. So if anybody here on the call has a $200 million project, I want to talk to you. Okay, so we can do all sizes. I'm just giving you the first three. I don't know kind of who the audience and how big your stuff is. And then obviously we generally do the construction cost estimating and the legal analysis. If you know how to run a construction cost estimate and you want to learn the legal analysis, you can do the whole thing yourself. On our software is going to be faster, so it would only be $500, but most people, you can't do the construction cost estimating better or faster or cheaper than we can. So under $1 million, we charge $1,000. The legal analysis is $600. So that plus the $500, you're into us for $2,100 to do a cost seg. Now you can hire a cost seg consultant. There's guys out there running around the country doing cost seg. I can assure you they're not as good as us because we're kind of tied in with the IRS. But they're going to be more expensive because they got to get on a plane and they got to do the field work. If you do the field work, you save a chunk of money. 1 to 2 million. I won't waste a lot of time on this. They go up from there because obviously there's more work to do. 2,000 for the engineering, 1,000 for the legal. Next one up is 3,000, 1,500, and they keep going up. Uh-oh. I'm running out of battery. I will go faster. If by chance I get kicked off, I will get back on. But I'm about done. I want you to come away with the idea that the cost of doing cost seg is like a loan origination fee for a 0% interest loan. There's no cheaper money in town. I said that very frequently in the past. Today, we all know the interest rates are extremely low. But borrowing the money interest-free, you pay a little bit to put it together up front so that it's done right. But the beauty is there is no bank qualification here. This is all federally mandated strategy, and you don't have to qualify for this. You just have to do it right. And that's the end of my presentation. I know we have Q&A. This is my contact info. You guys can have this. I'm going to go off the screen to get my power strip because I thought I had enough power on my laptop, but I don't. I am here. I can still talk to you. I'm just going to run right over here and grab my power strip. I apologize. Okay, cool. So here if you guys want to ask questions.
Brian, thank you for sharing all of that information. I know I have a couple of questions, and I'm sure Jacob does as well, and I'll be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. If anyone else has questions, feel free to type them down in the boxes below. I know Brian said he was going to be right back, but I'll wait till he gets
I'm listening to you. I'm almost there.
Okay. All right.
Over here. Now I'm plugged in.
Jacob, do you want to ask a question to start us off, or I have one written down here if you're not ready?
Go for it.
Okay. It was kind of earlier on in the presentation. So for the catch-up cost segregation, is there a time period where you would recommend, you know, I know a lot of people won't do it in the first year, but say, is it year 5, year 6, year 3? Is there some kind of sweet spot year that you see a lot?
Well, the biggest catch-up depreciation year, because of the way depreciation works, is going to be year 2.
Okay.
And then year 3 is going to be better than year 2, but not as big of a jump as it was from year 1 to year 2. Okay. So at some point, cost seg's not worth doing, because if you own the property for 20 years, you've already depreciated 20 years of a 27.5-year life. you're going to get some benefit, but it's probably not going to be worth it. So I generally tell folks somewhere in the seventh year, 7 to 10 year mark, the benefits start deteriorating to the point where the ROI is just not going to be there for you.
Okay.
But I would still say run a matrix estimate because I can't guess. I can't predict. I try and I look like an idiot. So it doesn't hurt to run the estimate and make your own decision on ROI. But somewhere around the 7th year is where we don't do cost segs on 15-year ownership properties just because the investor looks at the numbers and says, it's just not worth it. I'm already halfway through my depreciation on this one.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Makes sense. Yeah, I do actually have a question. So my property is kind of weird. It's one unit is residential and one is commercial. Would you usually just lump it together since it's all on the same lot, or what would be the best way to do the cost segregation for like that?
It depends, Jacob. Did you buy them together at the same time?
Yeah.
You have one closing statement?
Yep.
Okay, that helps. And then are the lots, are they both on one lot, meaning that you have one tax bill?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's one project for us because I can't separate the land improvements we were talking about. There's no way to break them up building by building, so we would treat it as one big property. Do you know how you're depreciating that? Because there's rules around that mixed use stuff.
Not 100% sure yet. It's only about 2 months and we still need to figure that part out. That's why I was excited.
It's going to come down to percent of square foot that is residential versus commercial.
Gotcha.
And I could guess at the number, but I usually leave that to the CPA.
Okay.
They're going to tell you, you're either going to depreciate the whole thing as either 39 year or 27.5 year based on that analysis. We don't provide tax advice. We're just the engineer. So we defer to the CPA on how they want to depreciate it prior to cost seg. And then the components of the stuff that we break out, the 5, 7, 15 year stuff, we're going to get out of that, whether it's 39 year, 27.5 years. So you still have a benefit, but yeah, it would be all one project in that case.
Sounds good.
I haven't seen any other questions come in, so I'll ask my other one. Where'd it go? I guess you kind of just touched on it on a mixed use. Have you ever had to defend a study with the IRS?
Oh, plenty.
How does that usually go?
The beauty, well, our reputation centers around we've never lost. We have to put in our engagement letters that we are required in writing to say we can't provide any guarantees in front of the IRS. But if you understand the rules and you follow the rules, the law is in our favor. What we have done over the last 10, 11 years, we actually get called into exams that are not done right, and we help the taxpayer right the ship and defend their position. And a big chunk of my responsibility as head of ops here is I get to sit across the table from IRS engineers all over the country.
Very nice. I know you said you did a $180 million project. Do all projects take the same amount of time?
No. No. If you're a cost say, let's say you have a single family house, and let's see, Portland, what are you at, like 350,000 in depreciable basis, with the land carved out, whatever you paid for, we'll call it 350,000. And you want to do full-blown cost seg, as opposed to Echo-Light. Echo-Light is where most of our investors in that scenario are going to go because the ROI is much better. But if you want to do full-blown cost seg and you're going to do the field work, you're going to be out in the field getting pictures and measurements. It's going to take you a few hours.
Yep.
The engineering, we say, if we do the engineering and legal, either way, when you hand it off to us and we turn it around, our standard position is we can turn projects in somewhere between 7 and 30 days. Mm-hmm. But it all comes down to the time of the year. We're in tax season right now. 9/15 is coming on us, so we're jamming busy. So our turnaround time stretches out because they're coming in faster than we can do them. You do a project in May, my guys are, playing Nerf basketball in the bullpen because they got nothing to do.
And then I'm assuming commercial and residential, different timelines for that as well.
It comes down, if you're talking about timeline as far as level of effort for field work, it's going to come down to the size of the building, right?
Okay.
You have to capture more data. The engineering and the legal, well, the engineering analysis, we have different factors. If we have construction drawings, we have to use them, they slow us down. Depending in your case, Jacob, if you have two buildings, obviously that takes a little more work than one building for us on the engineering side. So we have metrics. Usually when you hand your stuff off to us, someone on the team takes a look, make sure it looks complete, and then we can estimate when you're going to get it back from us.
Okay. I guess a follow-up question for the defending a study against the IRS. Is there an additional fee for that? And if I'm audited and they question the study, is there a fee for you to come and defend the work?
Built into our engagement letter, we do audit support at no additional cost. Let me back up. We do remote audit support at no additional cost. If we have to get on a plane, we have to charge for the travel costs. But I haven't seen the IRS, especially in cost seg, I haven't seen them traveling. They just don't need to. It's a cost to them. If they did want to come and look at the property, which is a little odd these days, and if you wanted us to be there to represent you, obviously there's a cost there. But generally, all of our work today is done remotely, phone and video conference with the IRS guys. And if we lay it out right, and they actually taught us what they want to see, right, over years of doing this. And that's why we do audit work for free, because we want to be in front of the IRS. People think that's weird. When we got started, we didn't have any experience in tax, right? We're just engineers and coders. What we want to do is understand what it is that they wanted to see and what makes their job easier, and then back into how do we get there as efficiently for you as possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So yeah, if you did a cost seg with us and you got a letter saying, hey, we want to look at your depreciation, you want to call us, we'll get on the phone with the auditor and your CPA or you, however you want to do that. And we actually run the exam. That's fundamentally, and the time that we do, and a lot of that's on me in my position. We have other guys as well, but I build that time to what we call product development. So we're constantly coding. So we want those opportunities to be tested.
Awesome. And then I had one other one. Would you recommend to all real estate investors to look into this or to perform a cost segregation?
I love that question because the answer is, if you're an investor that has no need for additional cash, then don't look at this. But if you can take cash and make money with that cash, yeah, you should be looking at this because you can leverage this strategy to grow your portfolio faster.
I love that answer to that question.
Me too.
It's all about the momentum of your working capital. How can you deploy that to work more for you?
Yep. I was talking to an old investor. He probably has, I don't know, 400, 500 properties scattered around mostly the south central, southeast U.S. And when I said that to him, and he's like, I'm never not going to know what to do with extra cash. I'm always going to have something that I can do with it.
Exactly.
Right?
So why not get it?
That's right. So we got a couple of real estate brokers on. My wife's a real estate broker here in Denver. So we have our own portfolio. We started in Southern California where we got married, and so that's her full-time gig, and our portfolio grows. We cost seg everything.
And when you say everything, is that 100 units or is that 5 units?
We don't have real big properties. We do a lot smaller stuff, both commercial and residential. Mm-hmm. If it qualifies for Eco Light, I will always do Eco Light. I think that the cost benefit is there. There is a little additional risk in front of the IRS, but we built it right. It just means a little more analysis. I've never failed to defend an Eco Light calc. I would not do full-blown cost seg if it met the criteria for Eco Light. I think you're spending money you don't need to. That's just some folks say, well, I want to follow all the rules. I'm willing to pay extra because I just feel more comfortable. That's totally fine.
It kind of sounds like, though, it's worth it to someone that may have 1 unit, 2 units, or 400 units, right?
Absolutely. And I always go back to that utilization. The big stickler for folks, if you're new in the investment game, and you're not, the legal term is called designated real estate professional. That's something that your CPA has to get behind if they're doing your tax return, or you got to read the rules yourself and make sure you can defend that. If you can't get behind that designation, then these accelerated deductions are considered passive losses, and they can only offset your passive income. They can't offset your W-2. If you can meet that, and the realtors on the call here, you most likely can, but I can't provide tax advice. My wife does. My CPA every year quizzes her to make sure we're within the rules. So when we buy property, we segregate it, and we bring a massive amount of depreciation deductions forward. Not only does it wipe out her taxable income in her business, but it takes out a chunk of my W-2, the withholding that, they're taking out of my paycheck.
Yep.
We get a nice refund every year. Now we are kicking the can down the road, and sometime down the road, I'm going to have more tax to pay, but so what? My portfolio is bigger. The rents are going to pay.
Can you, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but can you defer the depreciation recapture if you 1031?
It's a bit complicated, and the Tax Reform Act of 2018 put some wrinkles in that I'm not. I haven't seen enough of that to give you any kind of answer to confidence. I would tell you it's harder now than it was prior to 1/1 of 18, and it has to do with part of the Tax Reform Act was saying they're trying to put the screws to doing a like kind exchange on personal property, and that's problematic.
Yeah.
But before that, it was a great strategy to do cost seg right before you flipped it into 1031, because you get that massive deduction, and then you buy something bigger and your basis is real low.
Yeah.
So I would tell you that I got a lot of QIs I work with. In fact, I did this presentation last month with a group of qualified intermediaries that all they do is 1031, and they're trying to figure out how does cost seg play into their strategy for their clients under the new laws.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to talk with my CPA about that and see if I can quiz them on that.
Yeah, definitely. And if you guys are doing 1031 and you have a QI that I would quiz them as well, because they're paid to understand the 1031 rules.
Cool. I think that's all we have in terms of questions, at least in the Q&A and the chat box. So thank you again for your presentation. Like I said, this is the main event. I learned some stuff. I hope everyone else did. So I appreciate you taking the time and talking with everyone here tonight.
Yeah. Did we go 50 minutes?
We got it.
We did.
We got it.
Good job. Good job.